Ah, Prince, what's become of you? I simply wouldn't know you today. How could I suppose that you took part in such an affair? Well, you're upset today. He embraced and kissed him. That is, took part in what such an affair? I don't see any such an affair. Undoubtedly this person wished somehow to hinder Yevgeny Pavlik in something, endowing him, in the eyes of witnesses, with qualities he does not and could not have, Prince Shch. Replied rather dryly. Prince Lev Nikolaevich was embarrassed, but nevertheless went on looking intently and inquiringly at the prince, but the latter fell silent. And not simply promissory notes? Not literally as it happened yesterday? The prince finally murmured in some impatience. But I'm telling you, judge for yourself, what can there be in common between Yevgeny Pavlik and her, and with Rogozhin on top of it? I repeat to you, his fortune is enormous, that I know perfectly well. There's another fortune expected from his uncle. Nastasia Philippovna simply. Prince Shch. Suddenly fell silent, evidently because he did not want to go on telling the prince about Nastasia Philippovna. It means, in any case, that he's acquainted with her? Prince Lev Nikolaevich suddenly asked, after a moment's silence. It seems so, a flighty fellow. However, if so, it was very long ago, still before, that is, 2 or 3 years ago. He used to know Totsky, too. But now there could be nothing of the sort, and they could never be on familiar terms. You know yourself that she hasn't been here, she hasn't been anywhere here. Many people don't know that she's appeared again. I noticed her carriage only 3 days ago, no more. A magnificent carriage, said Adelida. Yes, the carriage is magnificent. They both went away, however, in the most friendly, the most, one might say, brotherly disposition towards Prince Lev Nikolaevich. But for our hero this visit contained in itself something even capital. We may assume that he himself had suspected a great deal since the previous night, and perhaps even earlier, but till their visit he had not dared to think his apprehensions fully borne out. Now, though, it was becoming clear, Prince Shch. had, of course, interpreted the event wrongly, but still he had wandered around the truth. He had understood that this was an intrigue. Incidentally, he may understand it quite correctly in himself, thought the prince, only he doesn't want to say it and therefore deliberately interprets it wrongly. The clearest thing of all was that people were now visiting him, namely, Prince Shch, in hopes of some explanation, and if so, then they thought he was a direct participant in the intrigue. Besides that, if it was all indeed so important, then it meant that she had some terrible goal. But what was this goal? Terrible. And how can she be stopped? It's absolutely impossible to stop her if she's sure of her goal. That the prince already knew from experience. A madwoman. A madwoman. But there were far, far too many other insoluble circumstances that had come together that morning, all at the same time, and all demanding immediate resolution, so that the prince felt very sad. He was slightly distracted by Vera Lebedev, who came with Lubotshka and, laughing, spent a long time telling him something. She was followed by her sister, the one who kept opening her mouth wide, then by the high school boy, Lebedev's son, who assured him that the star wormwood in the apocalypse, which fell to earth on the fountains of water, 44 was, in his father's interpretation, the railway network spread across Europe. The prince did not believe that Lebedev interpreted it that way, and they decided to check it with him at the first opportunity. From Vera Lebedev the prince learned that Keller had migrated over to them the day before and, by all tokens, would not be leaving for a long time, because he had found the company of and made friends with General Ivolgin. However, he declared that he was staying with them solely in order to complete his education. The prince was beginning to like Lebedev's children more and more every day. Kolya was away the whole day. He left for Petersburg very early. Lebedev also left at daybreak on some little business of his own, but the prince was waiting impatiently for a visit from Gavrila Ardalionovich, who was bound to call on him that same day. He arrived past 6 in the evening, just after dinner. With the first glance at him, it occurred to the prince that this gentleman at least must unmistakably know all the innermost secrets, And how could he not, having such helpers as Varvara Ardalionovna and her husband? But the prince's relations with Ganya were somehow special. The prince, for instance, had entrusted him with the handling of the Burdovsky affair and had asked him especially to do it, but, despite this trust and some things that had gone before, there always remained between them certain points on which it was as if they had mutually decided to say nothing. It sometimes seemed to the prince that Ganya, for his part, might be wishing for the fullest and friendliest sincerity. Now, for instance, as soon as he came in, it immediately seemed to the prince that Ganya was convinced in the highest degree that the time had come to break the ice between them on all points. Gavrila Ardalionovich was in a hurry, however. His sister was waiting for him at Lebedev's. The two were hastening about some business. But if Ganya was indeed expecting a whole series of impatient questions, inadvertent communications, friendly outpourings, then, of course, he was very much mistaken. For all the 20 minutes of his visit, the prince was even very pensive, almost absent-minded. The expected questions or, better to say, the one main question that Ganya expected, could not be asked. Then Ganya, too, decided to speak with great restraint. He spent all 20 minutes talking without pause, laughing, indulging in the most light, charming, and rapid babble, but never touching on the main thing. Ganya told him, incidentally, that Nastasia Filipovna had been there in Pavlovsk for only 4 days and was already attracting general attention. She was living somewhere, in some Matroskaya street, in a gawky little house, with Darya Alexeyevna, but her carriage was just about the best in Pavlovsk. Around her a whole crowd of old and young suitors had already gathered. Her carriage was sometimes accompanied by men on horseback. Nastasia Filipovna, as before, was very discriminating, admitting only choice people to her company. But all the same a whole troop had formed around her, to stand for her in case of need. One previously engaged man from among the summer people had already quarreled with his fiancée over her, one little old general had almost cursed his son. She often took with her on her rides a lovely girl, just turned 16, a distant relation of Darya Alexeyevna's. The girl was a good singer, so that in the evenings their little house attracted attention. Nastasia Filipovna, however, behaved extremely properly, dressed not magnificently but with extraordinary taste, and all the ladies envied her taste, her beauty, and her carriage.